knowledge produced by certain neurocapacity. And I'm wondering what kind of knowledge you're talking about. And the second one, how do you relate this knowledge perhaps to some art practices?
Well, the problem that I was pointing to was who does emancipation? Who actually accomplishes and implements it? What kind of subjectivity? Is it a human subjectivity? And do we need any subjectivity or history for emancipation? Or on the contrary, emancipatory practices will be practiced and implemented by desubjectified or dehistoricized constellations. And this is the debate that is happening between the apologists, adepts of accelerated practice, and those who still reside in the premises of the historical or quasi-humanist agenda. And what I meant by the knowledge which is not practiced by any subject, I meant the absoluteness of knowledge which is not related anymore to human mind, or which is not related to the diachronics of the human history, or to certain subjectivities and certain historical practices, knowledge that should be absolutely nominalized. And this nominal knowledge is regarded as the pure knowledge. And contemporary post-philosophical or post-humanist intellectual practice wants to research this absolute knowledge, but without mythologizing it, because they regard philosophy, they regard dramatic story, they regard history as dramatizing, mythologizing knowledge. And the new tendencies in post-humanist or transhumanist studies are to find this pure nominalized knowledge, which will not relate this knowledge to affectivities, to historicities, to dramaticities of the human mind, and to all those notes that were history but are considered to be just illusionary narratives by pure intellect, by pure intelligence. So this intelligence would be a post-historical, post-humanist intelligence, which would be relating to knowledge without this affective bond. And my point was that the reality is not something that we observe, and therefore the rebuke of this new nominalistic agenda towards previous historical studies was that you human subjects are inventing history. It's always invented, it's always contrived. So let's find this Kantian thing in itself, which always was sublime. And even when philosophy tried to search for this sublime, this was also mythology. So let's not regard this nominalicity of the absolute reality, absolute meta, as the sublime, but as something to be studied in a machinic way, in a technological way. So this is the point of extreme contemporaneity. But my point was that perhaps the constellation with the reality is not that I am the subject and I'm observing the reality, but that we are the extension ourselves of matter. We are the real. So whether we can transpose this projection and perspective of a subject which is mythologizing and looking into reality, into being the real ourselves.
So how is art related to this?
how is art related to this? It's related in a very, very complicated way because I think that lots of contemporary practices do not relate to this, unfortunately, because they are still based on, they are not altruist, I would say, enough. They are not altruist enough, and they are not modest enough, because contemporary practices, they are too arrogant, and they, in their arrogance, persevere in the modernist practice. So we need new extreme modesty, and that's what I was talking about, self-resignation, which sounds crazy, but
But Keti, you still can find some examples, not exactly to apply your theory to, for example, Anton Vidocle's last video film. Can it be kind of related to...
which one? About cosmology?
Yeah.
I think so. I think he researches those things that can be found.
I can name some other artists. For example, Ljubljana Dragan Želodino, who was a member of my Slovenski Kunst, who was very inspired by Fedorov. So I think you can, of course, obviously you are Russian.
Platonov that I mentioned was a Fedorovist.
Yeah.
Actually, he was the Bogdanovist and Fedorovist.
Yeah.
They really believed that the human beings can organize some extremity between each other, where they can get over this self-interest. But unlike the late Marxist or post-60s Marxist Western ideas about organizational, infrastructural transposition and change, they believed in some kind of inner change, the change of consciousness that would be like metanoia, that would be like almost quasi-religious change of anthropology of a human being that would immediately somehow eventually transpose constellation, correlation between me and you, between the collectivities. And this was a crazy thought of some kind of outer humanism and production of new humanity, which started from Kosmis, Russian Kosmis, then went through avant-garde, mutated with Marxism, and then was very much manifested by Platon. That's why I mentioned him. But I think that the Soviet film of '60s is also working very much with it, and I think Pasolini has to do with it a lot.
And if we have Tadej Pogačar just by chance, he has the Parasite Museum and he appears as a parallel here. So he's the one who does the works also related to Bruno Latour theory and all these things that are somehow not really about humanism explicitly. Sorry, but I was just pushing you into the debate, but it's interesting too, as we are looking for the concrete examples to